Of all the aircraft produced during the Great War, it is the Fokker DR.1 that is probably the most famous. This is in no small part due to the Baron Manfred von Richthofen. To most people, they know him as the Red Baron. Without him, the DR.1 would, despite being a solid aircraft, not have stood out much more than any other aircraft of the period. The legend, as many legends go, is somewhat larger than the reality. What is interesting is that Richthofen achieved most of his kills in aircraft other than the DR.1, and his red DR.1 was also not his first red plane. He flew a beautiful Scarlet Albatross. It is also interesting that while Richthofen was undeniably an excellent pilot, some of the others may have been better. Werner Voss adapted to the DR.1 extremely well, but the Baron's legend is one that will not die. The Sopwith triplane was quite a good aircraft in many ways. It was quite manoeuvrable and had an impressive rate of climb. Less than 150 of the triplane would ever be built, so its overall impact was not that great. It did, however, cause a stir within German military circles, and the reports of this new Allied fighter causing problems prompted them to want one of their own. While aircraft of the Great War are often considered to be not that great in terms of designs, this is a very narrow way of looking at it, as soon as the consideration of just how short a time aircraft have been around and that their use as a fighting platform was under 5 years. The advances made in aviation were nothing short of miraculous. There was no real idea what a combat aircraft would require when the war started. They learned as they went along, and the hard lessons were the ones that taught the most. The wings of the early aircraft could not take the weight or the recoil of guns. There was also no way to mount them on the cowling and not shoot the propeller off. One solution was to create pusher aircraft where the engine would be at the rear. Other ideas were to mount a drum-fed machine gun to the top wing where it was strong enough to hold it and it could fire above the propeller. This was a great idea for anyone who did not have to reload it in the air. The pilot could not reach the gun to reload it, so this really only appeals to a select few pilots that like standing up in the cockpit during combat and without a parachute. Not everyone thought this was a great solution. One of the first attempts at fixing this was by an industrious pilot who fixed metal plates to the inside of the propeller in line with the cowling gun. This was to deflect the rounds away. Although it did work and Garros was able to get some early kills with the design, it really only appealed to people that like to play roulette with their own bullets. As is usual, the Germans found a much better solution, and in this case the German in question was Dutch. Anthony Fokker would design the interrupter gear which prevented the gun from firing when the propeller was in front of the gun. While this seems a rather obvious solution, it was not quite that easy. One of the biggest problems would be the machine guns themselves. They needed to be reliable and consistent. It would not work if the gear said "don't shoot" and the gun acted like a typical man and did its own thing instead. Weight was also a problem. Initial machine guns would be made for the army. They were cumbersome and heavy and very unsuitable for aviation use. A solution was found and the Eindecker would give the Germans air supremacy for a time, a period that would become known as the Fokker Scourge. The DR.1 is impressive for how it came together. The Sopwith triplane leaned heavily on a previous design, the PUP. This aircraft was a known thing to its designers. While the changes from biplane to triplane are not small, they had a great testbed from which to start. The DR.1 did not have that. A lot of importance was placed on creating a German triplane, and it would be in the early part of 1917 when the triplane would be completed and Werner Voss would be able to test it. In theory, it was solidly constructed with the bottom and middle wings attached to the fuselage. It only utilised ailerons on one wing. It had a 110 horsepower rotary engine and was armed with twin synchronised 7.92mm Spandau machine guns. An order would be placed for around 320 planes. Voss would take Fokker 103-17 on its operational flight on the 30th of August 1917 and would get a kill. On the 1st of September, Richthofen would fly a DR1 and get his 60th kill. These two planes were the original prototypes. Voss was very impressed with the aircraft and he would add 20 more kills over 24 days to his total. He would lose his life in a bitter engagement where he was outnumbered and took the fight to his enemies. He forced some of the aircraft to leave the fight and hit nearly all that remained. At the time of his death, he was 20 years old. By October 1917, the production versions were starting to arrive. It had some strengths. The aircraft possessed good manoeuvrability, firepower and rate of climb. It also had some downsides. Its range was somewhat poor when compared to the aircraft it faced, and it was not a fast aircraft by this stage in the war. Another problem was it had early structural failures. These would delay the effective entry into the fight. It would become the favoured mount of some of the most Central Powers' best pilots. The last of these fighters would be delivered in May 1918. It would be replaced by the excellent Fokker D7. There would never be more than 170 DR1s in service. They would be pulled back for defensive duties, but pilots like Joseph Jacobs would still be flying his in September 1918. The DR1 will forever hold a special place in aviation history. Its numbers were relatively few, its time in service was relatively short, but the fascination it holds by enthusiasts and modellers will live long. The Meng kit. I am quite fond of Meng, and I have built several of their tune kits. These have always been a lot of fun. This was the first of their full-sized and serious kits that I have built. I paid around $60 for the kit, and at that price I am happy. It comes with a lot of parts, and the detail I thought was great. Mine had the broken part that did plague this release, but luckily it's not a super hard thing to fix. Not that you should have to do so right out of the box, but modelling is fun, right? The fit is good, but not great, and I am okay with it at the price I paid. I do not feel the engineering was there if the price point was higher. One area I was disappointed in though was the decals. The decals themselves are fine, but there is very little variation in the planes it covers. Considering some of the unusual schemes these birds were painted in, to have so many of similar plumage seems a bit dull and a missed opportunity. Sure, you can get sheets, but many of them are $30 just for the decals. This was a good sized project. It was not too quick, nor too long. I had a lot of fun working on it, and if I only have one DR1, then this is not a bad one to have.